Hands off the lady." Retired SEAL Single Dad stepped in and stopped the boardroom ambush. The boardroom was heavy with tension that morning, the kind that made the air thick and hard to breathe. A young woman stood near the head of the table, surrounded by a group of suited executives whose smiles had long since vanished. Their words were sharp, their tone dripping with accusation. They claimed she had leaked confidential information, that she was the reason the company's reputation was at risk. But deep down, she knew what this was really about. Revenge. She had exposed their dirty dealings, their hidden accounts, and their manipulation of the company's finances. Now, they were trying to destroy her before she could bring the truth to light. Her hands trembled as she clutched her folder, trying to stay composed, her voice breaking as she defended herself. No one listened. They laughed, twisted her words, and moved closer as if cornering prey. Just as the pressure reached its cruel peak, the heavy glass door opened with a soft click. A tall man entered quietly, wearing a simple jacket and jeans, not the attire one would expect in such a polished place. His presence changed the room instantly. His eyes, calm yet piercing, scanned the scene and immediately understood what was happening. It was her old friend, a retired Navy SEAL who had seen more battles than anyone in that room could imagine. A single father who had come to return the notebook she had forgotten in his car that morning. But the moment he saw the fear in her eyes, something within him shifted. The executives turned toward him, annoyed by the interruption. One of them barked, "This is a private meeting, sir. Leave immediately." He didn't move. His voice was low, controlled, but carried the weight of command. "It doesn't look like a meeting to me," he said. "It looks like intimidation." The men scoffed, dismissing him as an outsider. One of them reached for the woman's arm to pull her back into her seat, and that's when it happened. The SEAL's eyes narrowed and his voice dropped to a tone that could silence chaos itself. "Hands off the lady." The words cut through the air like a blade. The man froze, startled, but arrogance made him push again. In a split second, the SEAL moved, twisting the man's wrist with surgical precision and sending him to the floor before anyone could blink. The others backed away, stunned by how effortlessly he neutralized the threat without even raising his voice. The woman stood frozen, tears forming as relief washed over her. She had never seen him like this, but at that moment, she understood why people once called him a protector. He turned to her and said softly, "You're safe now." Around them, no one dared to speak. For the first time, the room felt the presence of a real leader, not a businessman, not a boss, but a soldier who didn't need medals or ranks to command respect. The executives didn't take him seriously when he walked in. To them, he was just an uninvited outsider who had stumbled into a world too powerful for him to understand. One of them chuckled under his breath, another crossed his arms and smirked as if daring the stranger to speak. But the man's stillness made them uneasy. He didn't look scared or uncertain. His calmness was the kind that came from surviving things far worse than boardroom politics. The woman stood behind the table, her eyes silently begging him not to get involved, but deep down she knew it was already too late. One of the men stepped forward, pointing his finger and saying, "This is a closed meeting. You have no right to be here." The retired SEAL's eyes didn't leave the woman. "I have every right," he said quietly, "when someone's being cornered." His tone wasn't loud, but it carried a weight that silenced even the arrogant laughter. The tension rose when another man, bigger, confident and used to getting his way, grabbed the woman's arm to drag her out. That's when it happened. The SEAL's eyes sharpened, his voice low but filled with a warning that could freeze blood. "Hands off the lady." The words echoed in the room, slow and deliberate. For a second, no one moved. The man holding her arm scoffed, trying to show he wasn't intimidated, but his hand started to tremble. When he tried to tighten his grip, the SEAL moved. It wasn't a brawl. It wasn't showy. It was precise, practiced, and fast. A step forward, a twist of the wrist, a sweep of the leg, and the aggressor was suddenly on the floor, gasping for air. The sound of the man hitting the ground broke the silence like a thunderclap. Everyone froze, shocked by how effortlessly it happened. The other executives stumbled backward, unsure of what to do. The retired soldier didn't gloat or raise his voice. He simply stood between the woman and the rest of the room like a wall that couldn't be moved. His breathing was steady, his eyes steady and watchful, the kind of calm that comes only after facing real danger. The man on the floor groaned in pain, clutching his arm, and the SEAL crouched slightly beside him. "Next time," he said softly, "think before you touch someone who can't fight back." His voice wasn't angry. It was controlled, dangerous in its calmness. The woman's eyes filled with tears. She had been strong for so long, holding herself together in a room full of people who wanted to destroy her. But now, for the first time, she felt protected. The man who had once fought for his country was now fighting for something simpler: decency. He turned to her and gave a reassuring nod as if to say it was over. Around them, the room stayed utterly still, everyone realizing they had just been reminded what true strength really looked like. Security rushed into the boardroom after hearing the commotion, but the retired SEAL stayed calm, his hand raised in quiet command. The guards hesitated when they saw the tension in the air, the woman standing behind him shaking but safe, and one of the executives still on the floor. The SEAL spoke with authority, his voice steady and controlled. "Call the police and make sure the cameras are rolling." His tone left no room for argument. The executives began shouting over each other, twisting the story, trying to make it sound like he had attacked them without reason. But their panic only revealed their guilt. The SEAL reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small flash drive. "You might want to see this before you finish your lies," he said quietly. The flash drive contained photos, voice messages, and documents the woman had sent him days before. She had known something was off. Strange emails, closed-door meetings, and contracts being altered behind her back. She had gathered proof but didn't realize she would need it so soon. The security team hesitated as the executives barked orders, but the retired soldier's tone carried more authority than any title in that room. He instructed them to play the footage from the building's surveillance system. As the large screen lit up, the truth began to unfold. The video showed the woman entering the room alone, calm and professional. It showed the executives closing the door behind her, advancing on her with hostile gestures, their faces hard and intimidating. Then it showed him entering, speaking quietly before one of them reached for her. The entire confrontation played out in front of everyone. His warning, the aggression, and the single, precise move that ended the assault before it began. The woman stood still, her hands clasped tightly as the reality she had been living finally came into the light. The HR director, who had been watching silently, turned to the SEAL and asked if he had seen this coming. He nodded slightly and said, "She told me they'd try something. I just didn't expect it today." The executives began to lose their composure, shouting accusations, but no one was listening anymore. The truth was undeniable. The company's legal team arrived moments later, reviewing the footage and the evidence she had collected. Each document exposed years of misconduct, contracts altered for personal gain, funds diverted to hidden accounts, and employees bullied into silence. The retired SEAL stood quietly as chaos erupted around him. He wasn't there for glory or recognition. He was there because someone needed to stand up for what was right. The woman turned to him, tears in her eyes, whispering, "You saved my life." He looked at her and replied gently, "You saved it yourself the day you chose to tell the truth." And with that, he walked toward the door, leaving behind a room where corruption had finally met its reckoning. Days later, the story had already spread far beyond the company walls. News headlines across the city told the same tale. Ex-Navy SEAL stops boardroom assault. Corrupt executives arrested. The incident had gone viral, not because of the violence, but because of the quiet strength the man showed in protecting someone who had no one else to stand by her. The woman, once seen as vulnerable and replaceable, had now become a symbol of courage and integrity. The company's board launched an internal investigation, and within days the executives who had tried to destroy her were removed, their schemes exposed in front of everyone they once commanded. Justice came swiftly, but it was his calm presence that people remembered most. He didn't seek attention, didn't give interviews, and didn't want his name in the papers. For him, it had simply been another moment where doing the right thing mattered more than keeping silent. Back in his quiet neighborhood, life went on as usual. The retired SEAL spent his mornings helping his daughter with schoolwork and his evenings fixing up an old car in the garage. The woman came by one afternoon, holding a small gift wrapped in brown paper. She wanted to thank him, not just for saving her, but for reminding her what strength truly meant. When he opened the door, his young daughter ran up to greet her, laughing and asking if she'd like to stay for dinner. The warmth of the small home was nothing like the cold boardroom they had stood in just days before. Over coffee, she told him how everything had changed. The company had offered her a leadership position, and the employees now looked to her with respect instead of doubt. She smiled, but her eyes glistened with emotion as she said, "None of that would have happened if you hadn't walked in that day." He listened quietly, then shook his head. "You were strong before I got there," he replied softly. "All I did was remind them that no one gets to take advantage of that." His words carried the calm wisdom of someone who had seen the world at its worst yet still believed in decency. Before she left, his daughter ran up and hugged her tightly, saying, "Daddy says you're brave." The woman smiled through tears, touched by the innocence of the little girl who saw heroism in both of them. As she stepped outside, she looked back at the man standing in the doorway. The same man who had once faced chaos and war but now lived peacefully, his greatest battle fought with courage and silence. She realized that true strength wasn't in power or titles but in the quiet choice to do what's right when no one else will. And as she drove away, his voice echoed in her mind, steady and unshaken, "Hands off the lady." Those words had saved her once, but they would stay with her forever, a reminder that real heroes never truly retire.